Evening. Welcome to St. Peter's Hove. I'm Father Alexander, and we're on our 231st step in our walking tour through the Bible. And I'm going to look at Isaiah 3, 4, and 5. These passages, except with one exception, are very rarely read in church, and it's not surprising because they are the most gloomy and indeed desperately depressing passages I've come across in the Holy Scriptures. Chapter 3 in the Jerusalem Bible is entitled Anarchy in Jerusalem. And it is gruesome in the extreme. It reminds me rather of those films that you see about Berlin right at the end of the Second World War. Here's God speaking. Now, the Lord God of hosts is about to deprive Jerusalem and Judah of resources and provisions, of all reserves of food, all reserves of water, of hero, warrior, judge, prophet, diviner, elder, captain, dignitary, counselor, architect, soothsayer. I shall give them boys for princes, raw lads to rule over them. People will be ill-treated by one another, each by his neighbour. The young will insult the aged, and the low the respected. Yes, a man will catch hold of his brother in their father's house to say, "You have a cloak, say you be leader, and rule this heap of ruins." So what we have is Isaiah's picture of the complete collapse of society. Very frightening. It does remind me of that wonderful film, which is hardly entertaining, but it's a brilliant film, Der Untergang, The Downfall, which is about Hitler's last days in the bunker. It's a German film, if you remember, with subtitles. And in it, one or two key moments, somebody says, All ist verloren, all ist aus. All is lost, all is over. And the despair in that is really very catching. And here too, it's clear that all is lost, all is over. And on that day, the other will protest, I am no healer. In my house, there is neither food nor clothing. And so it goes on. And then, of course, he singles out the females of Jerusalem for particular condemnation. And they're going to be degraded. And one of the things that's rather awful is instead of having beautifully dressed hair, they're going to go bald, or their scalps are going to be shaved. Again, that does remind you of some of those films you've seen about the Second World War, the way they shaved the scalps of women they considered to be collaborators after the Second World War in France. So instead of gorgeous clothes, sacking around the waist, and brand marks instead of beauty. Now, if we look to chapter 5, verses 1 to 7, we have the Song of the Vineyard. And this is, if you like, a little freestanding poem, but it's God's beef with the people of Jerusalem and the people of Judah. Let me sing, my beloved, the song of my friend for his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it, cleared it of stones, and planted it with red grapes. In the middle, he built a tower. He hewed a press there too. He expected it to yield fine grapes. Wild grapes were all it yielded. And now, citizens of Jerusalem and people of Judah, I ask you to judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have done for my vineyard that I have not done? Why, when I expected it to yield fine grapes, has it yielded wild ones? Very well, I shall tell you what I'm going to do to my vineyard. I shall take away its hedge for it to be grazed on, and knock down its wall for it to be trampled on. I shall let it go to waste, unpruned, undug, overgrown by brambles and thorn bushes. And I shall command the clouds to rain no rain on it. Now, the vineyard of the Lord God of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah the plant he cherished. He expected fair judgment, but found injustice, uprightness, but found a cry of distress. So this little Song of the Vineyard is in fact a parable. In fact, it's personally more than a parable, it's actually an allegory. The vineyard cultivated by the Lord is the house of Israel. It's Judea, it's Jerusalem. And the people in the vineyard, the plants in the vineyard, have not yielded the expected fruit. Therefore, he's going to abandon them. He's going to let the wild animals in. He's going to withdraw his protection. He's going to let them be humiliated and destroyed by their neighbors. So the reckoning is coming, is what these chapters are saying. And Jesus Christ himself, of course, used a very similar parable, allegory, when he was talking about the way the children of Israel of his day would reject him, and and therefore the vineyard will be taken away from them and given to others. And so Jesus was clearly bearing in mind this parable of the vineyard, and his hearers would have had this vineyard in mind as well. In other words, Jesus was comparing the people of his day with the people of Isaiah's day, saying that just as the people of Isaiah's day were driven out of Jerusalem and Judea, they lost the kingdom, they were taken off into exile. So something terrible is going to fall upon his own contemporaries, as indeed it did, which must have been very upsetting for the Jews of Jesus' day to hear, because he was comparing them to their ancestors and saying, you think you've learnt a great deal, but you've learnt nothing at all. You have repeated the tragic history of your ancestors. Well, we are in possession of the vineyard, are we not? The vineyard that we've been given is, of course, the church. Are we looking after the church as we should be looking after the church? Are we looking after everything we've been given in the way we should be looking after what we've been given? Are we responsible stewards? And the answer to that is almost certainly not. So what is going to happen to us? Are we going to find our vineyard laid waste? Are we going to find ourselves carted off into exile? Are we going to find ourselves, like these people in chapter 3, living amongst the ruins in anarchy? Well, it's depressing, isn't it? But to some extent, we're already among the ruins. It says here, I shall give them boys for princes, raw lads to rule over them. People will be ill-treated by one another, each by his neighbour. In other words, there will be anarchy. The reason there'll be anarchy is because you'll have a boy king. In other words, you'll have somebody who is not able to rule and to assert the rule of law. And of course, this passage was read by people in England in the reign of Henry VI, when he was crowned king aged 1 year old, and they naturally saw this, the disasters of Henry VI's reign, as somehow or another result of the fact they'd lost the favour of God. And then, of course, civil wars and so on followed in the reign of Henry VI, and then later on as well, so in the time of Edward IV and Richard III. Now, the chapter 5 then goes on to curse the people. Human nature has been humbled, humankind has been brought low, the eyes of the proud have been humbled, the Lord is more respected for his judgment, and so on and so forth. Woe to those who drag guilt around by the reins of duplicity. Woe to those who call what is bad good, and what is good bad. Now, these curses, as they are titled in the Jerusalem Bible, may not ring true with us, except this one does. Woe to those who call what is bad good, and what is good bad, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. In other words, you are morally perverse, is what the Lord is saying to his people. There are bad things that you do and you pretend they're good. There are good things you could do and you shun them, saying that they are bad. And this, in other words, the whole thing has gone sort of upside down. And this is true even today. There are so many things that we think are bad, which once we thought good. Chastity was once held to be a great virtue. Now it's just bad. And if you were chaste, you should go to a psychiatrist and be sorted out. Poverty, not having too much. Frugality, now seen as bad. Extravagance is seen as good, and so on. And then he goes on, woe to those who think themselves wise, believe themselves enlightened, because you're not. Woe to those whose might lies in wine-bibbing, their heroism is mixed with. They also slags them off for being alcoholics and things like that. And he says, all terrible things are going to happen, and indeed it ends Chapter 5 ends with the Lord summoning the invaders who are going to come in to Judea and Jerusalem and destroy it. One of the things that Isaiah is saying, of course, is that history is moral, not economic. What do I mean by that? Well, the invasion of the land of Judea by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, and people like that. Why did this happen? Well, it happened, I assume, because of economic reasons. The Assyrians and the Babylonians eyed Judea, and they thought, well, we better take that. Or it happened for strategic reasons. It was on the path to Egypt. We better get it before the Egyptians do, and so on. Certain countries are very unfortunate because of just their position. That is probably why it happened. But for Isaiah, it's the fault of the people living there. These things happen because they have gone away from the right path. Our present woes, which are minor compared to this apocalyptic vision that Isaiah sums up, our present woes are not going to cause the downfall of the nation. Or should we say this? Our present woes are political or they're economic? Yeah, they are. But I think they're also moral. Because if we were more moral people, we wouldn't have some of the problems we have. So, for example, if we were more moral people, our leaders would be more capable people because we would make better choices when we were voting for our leaders or when we were scrutinizing our leaders. We wouldn't be led astray by hucksters, mountebanks, and fraudsters. Well, I mean, you can think who I'm thinking about. But poor Liz Truss, for example. Did we really show good judgment when we raised her to be Prime Minister? I know most of us didn't raise her to be Prime Minister, but you see what I mean. Why wasn't she subjected to intense scrutiny? If we'd been more moral, more pernickety, more Puritan, maybe she would never have risen as far as she did. Did she appeal, in fact, to, I don't know, to our greed? Are we looking for a quick fix? Is it because we're fundamentally lazy? Have we abandoned the law of God insofar as we think we can entitle to everything, but we don't have to work for it? I don't know. I think Isaiah was very annoyed with his contemporaries. Don't think he'd be happy with us either. All the best with the vineyard of the Lord. Let's look after it. Bye.